At first glance, it's easy to dismiss this photograph as a simple landscape scene, complete with a lonely stretch of road and vintage black and white aesthetic. Perhaps even a still from a noir horror movie. Yet, it was actually the site of a horrific double murder, the first in a sadistic series of killings that would claim 5 innocent lives. Here's the story. On the night of December 20th, 1968, high school students David Arthur Faraday, 17, and Betty Lou Jensen, 16, were parked in the lay-by on the left-hand side of the photograph, out on Lake Herman Road in California. A known Lover's Lane spot, Faraday and Jensen were on their first date, seated inside Faraday's 1960 Rambler station wagon. Macabrely, the privacy they sought in the lay-by would also aid their killer in committing the murders unobserved. It's believed that their killer pulled up in a vehicle alongside theirs sometime after 11 p.m. before exiting and firing 2 warning shots into Faraday's car, ordering the pair out of the station wagon. As there were no living witnesses to the murders, the police could only construct a picture of the scene based on the evidence. David Faraday was callously shot in the head almost instantly upon exiting the vehicle, and following this, Betty Lou Jensen either attempted a brave and desperate escape or was cruelly ordered by the killer to start running, but was gunned down by 5 bullets, a little over 30 feet from the car. It's impossible to imagine the fear and confusion Betty Lou must have been feeling in those final moments. Her first date with Faraday, just days before Christmas, having been horrifically intruded by violence and brutality. Both victims were discovered by a passing car just minutes after the shooting, and their murders soon turned into a cold case, despite extensive police work. That was, until 7 months later, and the shootings of Mike Maggio and Darlene Ferrin. In an attack eerily similar to the Lake Herman Road slayings, Maggio, 19, and Ferrin, 22, were on a date and parked in a Lover's Lane spot at Blue Rock Springs Park, Vallejo, on the night of July 4th, 1969. As they watched the Independence Day fireworks celebrations and talked about life, a vehicle pulled up behind theirs, with the headlights blazing, before a male emerged from the driver's side and approached Ferrin's car, holding a powerful flashlight. Without saying a word, he fired 5 shots through the open passenger window, hitting both Maggio and Ferrin at point-blank range, walked back to his car, and then returned and fired a further 4 bullets, 2 into each victim. Miraculously, Maggio survived the shooting, despite being shot in the jaw, leg, and shoulder. But tragically, Darlene Ferrin was pronounced dead at the hospital a short time later. In an anonymous telephone call to the police, the killer confessed to both this shooting and the murders of Faraday and Jensen, stating, "I want to report a double murder. If you go 1 mile east on Columbus Parkway to the public park, you will find kids in a brown car. They were shot with a 9mm Luger. I also killed those kids last year. Goodbye." The sinister call kicked off a spat of condescending, arrogant letters sent to the police by the killer, now calling himself the Zodiac, as well as numerous cryptic ciphers coinciding with the stabbings of Brian Hartnell and Cecilia Shepard on September 27th, the latter of whom died, and the shooting murder of Paul Stein on October 11th. Despite numerous investigations, both private and official, as well as a host of suspects, the true identity of the Zodiac Killer has never been discovered. And following the final confirmed letter sent in 1974, in which he claimed to have actually killed up to 37 people, he was never heard from again. If the LAPD and SFPD's theories about Zodiac's age were correct, it's possible, if not even likely, that he could still be alive today, having gotten away with arguably the most infamous unsolved murders of the 20th century. In the early hours of the morning on December 26, 2004, the most powerful earthquake ever recorded in Asia ruptured underwater off the west coast of Sumatra, Indonesia, measuring a monstrous magnitude of 9.3. The tsunami that followed was the worst natural disaster of the 21st century, claiming the lives of over 220,000 people across 14 countries. One of these victims was Deborah Garlick, who lost her life along with 154 other Britons celebrating the seasonal holidays in Thailand. Hauntingly, an underdeveloped roll of film found amongst her personal effects provides a heartbreaking snapshot of her unwitting final days. 31-year-old Deborah and her partner, 33-year-old Sam McCarthy, were staying in Khao Lak for the Christmas and New Year break, and this photograph taken on Christmas Day, less than 24 hours before their deaths, shows Deborah's joy on the island of Phi Phi. Calling her parents on the 25th, Deborah wished them Merry Christmas and talked about her and Sam's holiday adventure, telling them she'd see them soon before hanging up. Unknowingly, this was the last time they would ever hear from their daughter. At around 10 AM on the 26th of December, completely without warning and catching the majority of people by surprise, the monstrous wall of turbulent, churning, frothing water reached heights of over 60 feet at its peak, slammed into Khao Lak and surrounding resorts. Rushing as far inland as 2 kilometers, 1.2 miles, the tsunami devastated everything and anyone in its path, smashing hotels and restaurants into splinters, ripping through residential areas, and sweeping away all evidence of humanity. 5,000 people were killed in Khao Lak alone, amongst them Deborah and Sam. As at home, Deborah's parents watched the news, horror-stricken, fearing the worst, yet hoping by some miracle that their daughter was safe. Horrifically, despite soon coming to terms with their loss without actually finding Deborah's body, it wasn't until April 2005 that her death was officially confirmed by the authorities. Such was the scope of devastation and sheer magnitude of the recovery and identification efforts. These final photographs of Deborah, taken in her celebration-filled days leading up to the tsunami, leave a stark and heartening reminder of just how quickly disaster can snatch away everything we hold precious. Nguyen Van Lem, photographed here in a checkered shirt and dark shorts, was a captain in the Viet Cong, who moments after this photograph was taken was unjustly executed at point-blank range by Saigon's chief of police, in doing so exposing the brutality and chaos of the Vietnam War to stunned public onlookers worldwide. On February 1st, 1968, American photojournalist Eddie Adams entered the Vietnamese capital of Saigon, searching for a blood-spattered story on the previous day's fighting during the infamous Tet Offensive, although he was soon disappointed as there seemed to be nothing of interest. By chance, just as he was preparing to leave, a squad of Army of the Republic of Vietnam Marines and Nguyen Ngoc Loan, chief of Saigon's National Police, marched past them on the street, forcing the handcuffed Lem along with them. Lem had been arrested in civilian clothes just before, at the site of a mass grave containing the bodies of several police officers and their families, and it was quickly purported that Lem himself had been part of the execution squad, although this is often called into scrutiny by all who research the shooting. What is known is that Lem was an officer in the Viet Cong, the North Vietnamese communist guerrilla force waging war in the south, and that he and his wife lived in the capital under the guise of tire merchants, but were actually successful weapon traffickers for other local insurgents. Adams started snapping a series of photographs that show the ARVN squad approaching, followed by Lone talking for a few moments with Lem, before the police chief calmly unholsters his revolver and shoots Lem in the head before walking away, quickly becoming one of the most infamous photographs of the Vietnam War, which we won't show on here for obvious reasons, and would advise anyone who looks for the full image that viewer discretion is advised. Adams captured the exact moment of the shot whilst the bullet is still actually inside Lem's head, a snapshot so horrifically morbid that it looks almost staged. Despite having just murdered another man in cold blood, Lone candidly explained his reasons for shooting Lem to the journalists, before sauntering off to continue with his day, whilst one of the Marines pinned a propaganda leaflet to Lem's face. Then they all left his body unceremoniously in the middle of the street. Regardless of his role or previous actions, Lem's execution without fair trial and just procedure showcased the gradual descent into madness of the war. Where the murder of civilians was commonplace, the wanton destruction of life was routine, and sights such as this were casually observed with little more than the blink of an eye. This photograph of Thai rescue diver Salmon Gunham courageously preparing to enter a dangerous network of flooded tunnels during a rescue operation was unwittingly the last photo ever taken of the heroic former Thai Navy SEAL. Sadly, he wouldn't emerge from the cave system alive. On June 23, 2018, 12 members of a junior football team and their assistant coach entered the Tham Luang Nang Nong cave system in Thailand, either to explore or to celebrate one of their birthdays with a unique party. But shortly after they'd entered, unexpected heavy rainfall flooded a large portion of the cave, trapping the group. When the group failed to return that evening, their head coach raised the alarm, and an intensive search operation was set in motion, drafting in expert members of the Thai Navy SEALs, USAF, Australian Federal Police, and British Cave Rescue Council, the latter of whom eventually discovered the missing group on July 2nd, but this was merely the tip of the operation's dire circumstances. After 10 days in the cave, the group was severely dehydrated, hungry, and sapped of both energy and any hope of being rescued. Positioned around 2.5 miles from the cave's entrance on a narrow rock shelf above the floodwater level, fighting against the clock to deliver vital oxygen, supplies, and morale to the trapped group, it was on one of these missions that the 37-year-old gunman died, after successfully navigating the flooded chamber with some sections so narrow that he had to remove his scuba cylinders to squeeze through, and others being completely deluged with water so murky that even his dive torch couldn't light the way. Working in these nightmarish conditions, again on the return trip, tragically, Gunnan had failed to save enough oxygen for himself and fell unconscious underwater. Despite CPR attempts from his dive buddy, the former SEAL was pronounced dead on July 6th. Amazingly, all 13 of the trapped group were rescued in a daring 3-day operation that required them to be rendered unconscious and strapped to a rescue diver for the grueling 3-hour journey back through the cave. And even more astonishing is that all of the group made a full recovery from the 18-day ordeal. Salman Gunnan left behind a loving widow, and his selfless actions in proactively volunteering for such a dangerous rescue operation reflect the character of a man whom all close to him held in the highest regard, perhaps best summed up by his former SEAL team members. His determination and good intention will always be in the heart of all SEAL brothers. Today, you get some good rest. We will complete the mission for you. Just a short while after this rather regal photograph was taken, a cataclysmic assassination would occur, setting in motion a domino-like series of events, alliances, and age-old rivalries that would plunge the world into war. A huge churning morass of men, material, and bloody stalemate that would claim the lives of around 10 million military personnel and at least 12.5 million civilians. Australian Archduke, or fully, Franz Ferdinand Karl Ludwig Joseph Maria of Austria, photographed here in the plumed hat, his arms linking his wife's, Sophie, Duchess of Hohenberg, was visiting the turbulent province of Bosnia and Herzegovina on June 28, 1914, when they were both assassinated in Sarajevo by Bosnian dissidents in league with the nationalists' Black Hand organization. Their ultimate goal was to relinquish Austro-Hungarian control over the province, believing that killing the Archduke in a show of brutal terrorism would entice other nationalists to rise up and be heard amongst the cries for a free Bosnia. In the photograph, the Archduke and Sophie can be seen emerging from the town hall, looking confident and even brash, after having already survived an attempt on their lives earlier that morning when one of the 6 would-be assassins bounced off the rear of their vehicle, wounding onlookers and damaging the next car in the motorcade. Seemingly untroubled by this brush with death, the couple returned to their car to continue the procession, driving straight into the path of Gavrilo Princip, the consequences of which the following 4 years of warfare, bloodshed, and misery would lay bare. Princip stepped onto the sideboard of the vehicle and fired 2 shots from a pistol, the first hitting Ferdinand in the jugular and the second striking Sophie in the abdomen. Both were fatal wounds, 2 shots that would unknowingly lead to the slaughter of over 20 million lives. Now, if that's not a butterfly effect, we don't know what is. So that's it for this video. That's 5 relatively normal looking photos that hold dark and disturbing histories. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.